Good evening. My name is Francisco Lopez and I will be presenting the Peachtree Securities Case A. The first question that was asked was about T-bonds. T-bonds are not affected by the state of the economy at all because T-bonds hold a fixed rate of return set by the Federal Reserve. Return on a T-bond is widely thought of as risk-free. This is not entirely true. Although T-bonds are free of default risks, they do have reinvestment risk. Question 2 asks to find the expected rate of return for each of the alternatives. From the probabilities and rates given in Table 1, T-bonds have an expected rate of return of 8%, TICO has an expected return of 13.5%, Gold Hill has an expected return of 8.8%, and the S&P 500 offers the best potential return of all the alternatives with 15%. Question 3 asks to find the standard deviation and variance of the four alternatives. These statistics measure an investment's volatility. T-bonds are the least volatile investment because your return rates will always remain constant at 8%. The riskiest alternative is the S&P 500 with a 16.4% standard deviation. The coefficient of variance is a measure of the risk-return trade-off. T-bonds and the S&P once again are the lowest and highest of this category. If an investor were to form a portfolio by putting $10,000 in Gold Hill and TICO, their portfolio would have an expected return of 11.15%, standard deviation of 2.89%, and coefficient of variance of over 25%. By comparing the portfolio to the individual stocks, we can see that TICO has a higher mean return but has more risk due to the fact that the portfolio benefits from the diversification effect. The portfolio only benefits from the diversification effect because the two stocks are negatively correlated. If an investor were to remove Gold Hill in the previously mentioned portfolio and replace it with the S&P 500 stock, the portfolio would increase its standard deviation from 2.89% to over 14%, which would increase its overall riskiness. Question 6 asks, what would happen if more and more randomly selected stocks are added to a portfolio? The more stocks that are added, the less risk a portfolio contains. This allows investors to take chances on riskier stocks due to a portfolio's overall risk being reduced. Question 6 also asks what the different types of risk are. Diversifiable risk is risk specific to a company, such as a workers' strike or a release of bad earnings. Market risk is the systematic risk of the market. Market risk can be affected by things such as government policy or natural disasters. And total risk is both a diversifiable risk and market risk combined. Question 7 asks to plot the returns of T-bonds, Gold Hill, and TICO against the returns of the S&P 500. The black line running through each distribution of returns shows the beta for each company, while the distance between the line and the distribution of returns shows the amount of error in the distribution model. The further the line is from the model, the less valid the model is at predicting future returns. Question 8 asks to graph TICO's expected rate of return as well as TICO's required rate of return. Because TICO's expected rate of return is above the required rate of return, investors should consider TICO undervalued and should purchase the stock. Question 9 revolves around changes in the CAPM equation. Changing the risk-free rate to 11% in the CAPM equation would result in a required rate of return of 13.4%. If the market premium were to increase from 7 to 8%, the required rate of return would be 12.8%. And if TICO's beta would increase to 1, up from 0.6, the required rate of return would be the market rate, or 15%. Question 10 gives a scenario of TICO's long-term debt ratio decreasing. If their long-term debt ratio were to decrease, it would result in a lower beta. The resulting lower beta would mean that the company is less risky and their required rate of return would also decrease. Thank you.